2 millenniums ago, there was a war between the human world and the other, the underworld. But somebody from the underworld woke up to justice and stood up against this legion alone. His name was Sparda. Later, he quietly reigned the human world and continued to preserve harmony until his death. He became the legend, the legendary Dark Knight, Sparda. He also had a child named Dante. We don't like to talk about him. He's kind of an asshole.
Hi, I'm Dante. Do you have a demon problem? Cause shit, that's bad, man. I'm Dante, professional demon hunter. If you you see that demon? Boom, no more demon. That's a dead demon. Oh, is that another demon? Ka-chow, it's gone. That's Dante's catchphrase, ka-chow. I'm gonna fucking sue Pixar. Come on down to my shop, Devil May Cry. I won't, cause I ain't no punk bitch. But Devil May Cry, I'm gonna fucking stab him, it's gonna hurt, and he's gonna be like, ow. Bro, what the fuck? Devil May Cry, Dante cuts the competition. I mean that very literally. If anyone tries to undersell me, I will fucking murder you. Can't go out of business if you have a monopoly.
Growing up, I think we all have certain games that we have an unbreakable fondness for. We all have certain games that, no matter how dated they get, we can always look back to fondly. For me, 2 of those games are Devil May Cry 1 and 3. I remember playing those games as a kid and fucking being enthralled by the idea of a half-demon fighting to protect mankind. I fucking loved the combat systems. And with the upcoming release of Devil May Cry 5, I found myself in the mood to not only revisit 1 and 3, but the entire series. Over the course of a couple months, I went back and played every single game in the franchise. 1, 2, 3, 4, and the DmC reboot. Despite certain moments, I had an absolute blast doing it. I legitimately loved going through them all. It was so much fun to find myself enthralled by these games again. But what exactly is it about these games that makes them so fucking good? So fucking good! What makes these games, most of these games, such a joy to play? Well, that's what I want to try to explain for you guys. I decided to sit down and review every single game in the entire franchise in one huge beast of a video. However, with so many games and so much to talk about in each one, I quickly realized that, I'm gonna need some help with this one, so I asked my brother, SystemMltdwn, and my good friend Narrcost, both of whom are also big fans of Devil May Cry, to help me out with this video, and they were both kind enough to agree. So, I'll be covering Devil May Cry 1, the main campaign in Devil May Cry 2, as well as the main campaign for Devil May Cry 3. Meltdown will be covering Lucia's campaign in 2 and the entirety of 4, and finally Narr will be covering Virgil's campaign in 3, as well as the DmC reboot. So, huge thanks to them for agreeing to help out with this. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching this video as well as we have all enjoyed making it. Now, without further ado, here's the entire Devil May Cry series reviewed.
Hey, Trish.
Hey, Dante. How's your family? Hey, Dante, why are you crying? Don't you know devils never cry?
Let's rock, baby.
I'd be remiss to state the interesting story about Devil May Cry 1's development that pretty much anyone and their fucking mother points out when discussing the game. You see, originally this game wasn't actually supposed to be the Devil May Cry we all know and love. The game was actually supposed to be a Resident Evil game. Resident Evil 4 to be exact. In this early incarnation of the game, the protagonist was a guy named Tony who had combat skills and an intellect far exceeding that of any normal person, and the plot of the game was supposed to revolve around unraveling the mystery of why he had said skills and intellect. The game was intended to be a far more stylized entry into the Resident Evil series, but it ended up feeling like such a diversion from the franchise that it wouldn't really fit, so they decided to rework it into its own game. And thus, the main character's name was changed from Tony to Dante, the name of the game was changed to Devil May Cry, and a whole new franchise was born. There, alright? Are you happy? I said it. I said the Resident Evil thing. Stop typing that comment about it originally being a Resident Evil game every fuck time. I swear to fuck. I heard my fucking wrist banging on the table. sorry about that. So, anyways, developed by Team Little Devils, a group of developers within Capcom, and released in 2001, Devil May Cry was pretty much an instant hit. The game received a ton of praise from critics, and all of it was really well deserved. It also received its fair share of criticism, which was also pretty well deserved. We'll get into that later, but for now, let's explain what the game actually is. Devil May Cry takes you on an adventure as Dante, the half-demon son of the legendary Dark Knight Sparta, as he explores through a castle on Malay Island in order to stop the return of Mundus, leader of the underworld and the one that orchestrated the murder of Dante's mother. So, you know, all around a pretty great guy. Now, one thing that I love about this game is that they show you right off the bat that this Dante guy is a fucking badass. The game literally starts with him getting stabbed through the fucking chest with his own sword and has a motorcycle thrown at him, only for him to shoot said motorcycle away with his guns and brush off the gaping stab wound like it was nothing but a fucking splinter. Again, this dude is a badass. But this game doesn't just show you that your character's a badass, it makes you feel like a badass. As you go through the island, you encounter all sorts of bad guys that you get to face fuck with your weapons. From evil puppet monsters to lizard men with swords to these Grim Reaper looking dudes with giant safety scissors. There's no shortage of enemies to fight, and each one is a pleasure to kill. The combat is tight, and you genuinely feel like a badass as you pull off different combos while fighting them. And you don't feel accomplished when you kill these enemies just because you killed them. You feel accomplished because you looked damn cool while doing it. Remember, this game was developed around the idea of stylish combat. The combat system is also accentuated very well by the level design. The big gothic castle doesn't just look cool, it also acts as a way to force you in a close proximity of the various demons you have to kill. These enemies will absolutely swarm you if you aren't careful, and that forces you to actually think about how to go about killing them. It creates extra excitement and challenge. But of course, what would cool looking demon monsters be without some sweet weapons to shove in their tight little face pussies? I'm fucking gross. You start off the game with your basic force-edged sword, just fucking sword. Simple enough. Not much you can. It's fucking sword. But as you go through the game, you can also unlock Ifrit, a pair of fire gauntlets that will fucking plow anything in your way. And of course, you also get Alistair, another sword, but this one with a sweet, sweet hint of lightning. And of course, as you go through the game, you also gain a whole host of different guns to take down enemies from a range, or at the very least, keep your combo going until you can get closer to them. Now, while the melee weapons may seem a tad lacking, they do each play very differently, and it adds enough incentive to make the player want to go between the different weapons and try out and see what works for them. And of course, you can upgrade them all separately to unlock different moves. For example, with Alistair, you can't really do the same thing else, but with Alistair, you can gain the ability to fly and shoot lightning at people when you go into your Devil Trigger mode. It's pretty goddamn cool. But the basic enemies aren't where the combat system really shines. To get the full DmC experience, you need to look at the bosses. Now, these bosses are by no means unbeatable, but they are challenging, and you can't just run in swinging and expect to come out on top. They come at you aggressively, and if you want to beat them, you have to take note of things like your environment and their attack patterns. If you don't, well, good luck. On top of that, the back and forth between Dante and the bosses are actually really interesting to watch. Each boss has their own unique personality. They may seem underdeveloped from a story standpoint, but there's still something oddly satisfying about seeing this giant spider talking shit when you first meet, only for him to realize, oh, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have fucked with this guy. Now, that isn't to say there aren't problems with these bosses. Unfortunately, because this game is essentially an underfunded Resident Evil title that got spun off into its own game, they had to make a few bosses last throughout the entire duration of a game with 23 missions, so you have to fight each of these bosses multiple times. While they're really fun to tackle the first time, when you have to fight the same guy like 3 different times, it begins to feel like a bit of a chore more than an actual experience. This isn't to say fighting the same bosses can't be fun. Hell, in this game there's an example of a boss that is really fun to refight, Nilo Angelo. This guy is handled very well because right off the bat the game shows you there's a mystery behind him and you end up wanting to know what the hell this guy's deal is. I love this guy, but when every other boss has really nothing more interesting to offer than their visual styles and difficulty to fight, I don't know, it ends up coming across as lazy. It isn't, but that's just kind of how it feels playing it. Hell, this fucking asshole even has an attack that literally makes you refight one of the 2 previous bosses. I'm not kidding. They make you refight an old boss during a boss fight. I fucking hate this guy so much. This isn't the end of the game's problems either. Unfortunately, for some reason, they took a game that was developed from the ground up around its combat and decided to implement platforming? Really shitty, boring, sometimes frustrating platforming. Fortunately, these platform sections aren't too frequent, but they are enough of an annoyance to pull me out of the experience whenever they do pop up. They also threw in an underwater section for some reason, and oh no. Oh, why would you do this? But even that stuff is more forgivable than some of the fucking painful dialogue in this game. Look, I get it, this was the early 2000s. Pretty much any game had troubles telling decent stories through dialogue that didn't come across as cheesy, but holy shit, are you seriously telling me you guys couldn't do better than this?
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
Oh, why are you like this, Dante? With all this being said, you know, despite the painful dialogue and the poorly executed platforming sections and this shit, this game is very well done for what it is. It's a bit unrefined, I guess you could say, but it's legitimately challenging and a very enjoyable experience. Like, seriously, this game is fucking fantastic, and I love it. If you haven't played it, do it. Fucking play it! Fucking do it! Well, I think I've said just about everything that can be said about this game. Hell, I've probably said more than I should about this game, considering we have to go through the next 4 in the same video, so let's go ahead and move on to the next game in the franchise, Devil May Cry 2. God help me.
Dante, wanna help me kill, how do you say, a wealthy businessman and bring down capitalism?
Let's see. Looks like today's your lucky day.
Both sides say heads? Why would you even do that? Why not just say, how do you say, yes?
Because it makes me look cool.
No, it doesn't.
With the success of the first game, it was pretty clear right from the get-go that Capcom would be making a sequel. After all, what company doesn't like making money, right? And with it being clear that this was going to be a very profitable series, the environment was ripe for Capcom to pump more money into it and really build on what made the first game such a success. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. Capcom being, well, Capcom, made a lot of really weird decisions when it came time to make the sequel. The first being that Capcom didn't even hand its development back to Team Little Devils, the developers behind the first game. From what I can gather, they didn't even know that the sequel was being made until development was well underway. Hell, the guy who's credited as the game's director wasn't even there for the vast majority of the development. Hideki Itsuno, I probably fucked that name up, was just kind of thrown in towards the tail end of production after Capcom decided they weren't happy with the previous director's work and wanted Itsuno to get the game back on track. I honestly would have loved to see how bad the original game must have been if they had to switch directors to fix it. Unfortunately, whatever Itsuno did to correct the course of the game wasn't enough. This game was bad. But why? What was it about this game that made it such a disappointing sequel? Well, I guess we should start with the plot of the game, and I'm using the word plot very lightly here. Now, I'm not going to focus too much on this game's story, because to be quite honest, neither did the developers. But the general premise is that Lucia and this old lady asks Dante to help them deal with Arius. Or Arius, how do you fucking pronounce that?
His name is Arius.
Oh, that's how, gotcha. An evil businessman with ambitions of becoming a demonic god by summoning the power of an ancient devil and ruling the world. As you go through the levels, you encounter various demons and bosses, just as with the first one, killing them all as you make your way to Arius, until you eventually kill him, and fight one final boss fight, and proceed to wish you'd never played this fucking game. So what about this game's story doesn't work? Well, to put it simply, it's fucking boring. I mean, let's look at our main character, Dante. In the first game, he was cocky, like really fucking cocky. He joked around quite a bit and didn't seem to take anything particularly seriously until about halfway through the game. This ultimately made for a very likable character that the player could really root for. In this game, he's kind of a boring asshole who doesn't really even seem to want to be here.
Now we can stop Arius's ambition.
Whatever.
Throughout the game, he hardly ever says anything, and when he does, he sounds so distant and uncaring. How can you expect the player to give a shit about the story when even your own main character doesn't? Although maybe it's a blessing in disguise that he doesn't talk much, because a lot of the dialogue that he does get is... it's really bad.
Crap like that doesn't interest me. but your swan song will.
Lucia does get her own campaign where she's the main character, and at least in that one, she has some character to her and shows at least some development as a person, but we'll talk more about her later. Another strange decision they made with Dante's character is this fucking coin.
Please, deal with Arius and his master for us.
Looks like it's your lucky day.
Every time he's confronted with some sort of request, he flips the coin to decide whether or not to help. This may be to emphasize that this new Dante doesn't really give much of a fuck about anything that's going on, but it just comes across as weird and confusing when at the end of the game it's revealed that the coin is heads on both sides, meaning he was always going to help regardless of which side the coin landed on. So why does he do this exactly? Is it just to make the other characters think he's cool or something? What? Another problem with the campaign is Arius, the antagonist of the game. This guy may honestly be one of the most boring antagonists in the entire Devil May Cry franchise. Now, Mundus in the first game wasn't exactly the most interesting character. He's just sort of a wahaha, I'm an evil threat you need to deal with sort of blank slate of a character. But at least with Mundus, your main character had some personal connection to him. Remember, Mundus is the one that killed Dante's mother and brainwashed his brother Virgil. Again, Dante has a personal investment in taking this guy out. But this guy? Arius? Dante doesn't really have any reason to give a shit about this dude, and to be honest, neither does the fucking player. He's just fucking boring. He doesn't really ever do anything interesting. He just sort of walks around and appears menacing. But hey, we don't play games for the story, right? We play them for the gameplay, so what's that like? Well, in the first game, everything was developed from the ground up around stylish and fun combat. In this game, it almost feels like the idea of combat being fun and looking cool was kind of forgotten about. Your ability to do combos with your melee weapons is really limited. You basically get Dante's stinger attack, the basic slash, an uppercut, and a downward strike. Beyond that, you can't really do much of note. Even the melee weapons themselves are really lackluster. In the first game, you had 3 main weapons: your starting basic sword, which would later be transformed into the Sparta sword, Alistair, an electric imbued sword that unlocked your Devil Trigger ability, and Ifrit, a pair of fire gauntlets that let you punch the ever-loving fuck out of your enemies. Each weapon was unique and incentivized experimenting with each one. In DmC 2, you just get 3 different swords that don't really have any special properties to them. You get Rebellion, Vendetta, and Merciless. The only difference between them are slight differences in range and damage output. There's nothing unique about any of them, and you really may as well just go through the entire game with whichever one you think looks coolest, because they really don't have any meaningful impact on the actual combat. Hell, because sometimes they're very easy to miss. You can honestly not even find them if you're not paying attention, and again, because they don't really affect gameplay at all, you wouldn't really be missing out on anything. You don't even get those cool cutscenes when you find new weapons like you did in 1. You just sort of find them laying around, pick them up, and move on. And unfortunately, the guns really aren't much better either. I mean, Ebony and Ivory are about as effective as they were in the first game, except now you can upgrade their damage output, but every other gun just kinda... all the other guns just kind of suck now. Like, honestly, my favorite 2 weapons in the first game weren't even any of the melee weapons. My favorite 2 weapons were the shotgun and the fucking grenade launcher. Oh god, that grenade launcher. Oh god, that grenade launcher. Oh god. But in this game, all the guns just kind of fucking... the shotgun just feels like the most ineffectual piece of fucking crap I've ever... How did you make a shotgun boring? What? And of course, instead of a grenade launcher, you have this fucking RPG, which... it's just the slowest piece of shit I've ever seen. Oh my god. Now, I get that I'm kind of in the minority when it comes to my love for the guns in Devil May Cry 1. And most people really didn't give much of a shit. They just all about that thick sword action. But personally, I fucking loved the guns in 1. They were so much fun, and it's so fucking disappointing to see how just how boring they are in this one. Oh, why? They even changed how you go about upgrading Dante's arsenal. In the original game, you could spend red orbs to unlock new moves and do more impressive combos, but in 2, all you can really do is upgrade the damage output of each weapon. So you're no longer learning new skills and creating new avenues for more impressive combos. You're just kind of making it so you can kill enemies quicker and don't have to spend as much time fighting demons. In a game about fighting demons. fun. Now, this isn't to say every change in the combat system was bad. In fact, there were actually a few additions they made in 2 that I don't think get nearly enough credit. For starters, 2 introduced the ability to quickly change your guns mid-combat with the right trigger, meaning if you're in the middle of a fight and need to swap pistols for your shotgun, you no longer have to pull yourself out of the actual game and go into the menu and manually select it. Just press right trigger and boom, you've got your shotgun. They also added a new level of depth to your devil trigger mechanic by adding the ability to customize its effects to a degree. They allow you to change its elemental effect, whether it focuses on dealing damage or healing you, and allow you to switch between having the ability to fly or run fast as fuck! I'd also be remiss to point out that they vastly improved the camera angles and made platforming much more bearable. The platforming it's still fucking awful, but at least it's better than this shit. Unfortunately, however, none of those new mechanics feel particularly necessary to the combat because of how much easier the game is, which is largely due to the level design. One of the things I praise about the first game is the tight, claustrophobic design that forced you into close proximity of your enemies. This made it necessary to keep on the move and take note of your surroundings, but with this game, they made everything far more open. The openness means instead of having to quickly dispatch your enemies with cool melee combos, you simply have to just stand back and shoot them with whichever gun you personally prefer to use. I think this problem is best displayed when dealing with bosses. Oh god, these fucking bosses. Look, I think the best way to explain the problem with the bosses in this game is to just show you. So I want you to watch this clip from when I was replaying the game to brush up on it, and I think the issue will be pretty clear here. Oh, you've got to be fucking kidding me. These bosses are so boring to fight. It honestly makes me want to just stop playing whenever they pop up. There's no strategy needed here. Just stand back and shoot. Stand back and shoot. Stand back and shoot. It's fucking awful. And sure, this game has more bosses than Devil May Cry 1 did, but at least the few bosses we got in 1 were actually fun to fight. We didn't even get those fun little back and forths between the bosses and Dante in 2. With the exception of Arius and this 3-headed guy, all the bosses just sort of show up and Dante kills them without really saying a word. There's no personality to any of them, just making them all the more forgettable. Hell, most of them aren't even visually appealing. The only ones that actually look interesting to me are Argisax, the demon that comes out of the fucking building, and Phantom. Yeah, they reuse Phantom in this game. Fucking Christ. All in all, this game is just boring. The story and characters are uninteresting, the basic enemies are just a chore to deal with, and the bosses are just kind of a drag to fight. There's nothing fun about this experience. Honestly, the only thing that I found fun about this game was the fact that they added a button that lets you do cartwheels and shit. The upside to this whole shit show is that right around the corner we have Devil May Cry 3, which is honestly my favorite in the fucking series. But before we talk about that, I'm going to step aside for just a little bit and let my brother talk about one final aspect about this game that I've more or less ignored throughout this review: Lucia's campaign. Glad I don't have to tackle that shit.
So, when the development team started on Devil May Cry 2, the first thing that they did was distribute surveys about the first game and try to use fan feedback to improve upon the formula. And the most prevalent complaint that they tried to fix was the inability to play as Trish in the first game. While their hearts were in the right place, they failed to really implement and fix anything in almost every way possible. Lucia's campaign unfortunately falls into the same pitfalls as Dante's campaign. Most of them are unavoidable considering it uses all of the same game assets. As a character, she feels like a decent counterpoint to Dante's style. She is more agile, jumps higher, moves faster, but overall loses power. Instead of Dante's pistols, she carries throwing knives. And she does start with her own devil trigger ability, which takes the form of a weird demon bird looking thing. Just as in Dante's, you can collect several primary and secondary weapons, but there's never really any incentive to use them. The only one that really ever feels useful is the bowgun, and that's because that's the only useful weapon when fighting underwater. You can use your main swords underwater, but they might as well just not even exist. And most of the other stuff you pick up, there's no fanfare. You can bypass weapons. Like, they're so unnecessary, like, you could not find weapons, and it wouldn't affect you in any way. As a character, Lucia really kind of had a lot of story potential to her. An orphan girl being raised by a group of demon hunters should offer so much more in story potential, but it ends up to her just being a mission. She's not given any personality, which, I mean, they did that to Dante too.
Whatever.
Most interactions she brushes off, usually responding with just like one-sentence responses, and in any lore that's there, it feels like it's just there for lore's sake. You never at any point feel any reason to care about her. There's no reason to be shocked during some supposed bombshell being dropped about her past. I mean, they attempted character development, and honestly, they did feel like they tried more to give her some kind of character development than Dante, but it all just really fell flat. Then there's the matter of Lucia's levels. Those are extremely disappointed because they're merely regurgitated from Dante's campaign with slight modifications. Some of them are shortened, some of them are literally just Dante's level in reverse, and all the bosses are pretty much the same. You do fight a slightly different version of the final boss, and you get an underwater boss, but a lot of the boss choices from both sides are just really questionable. I mean, the design of a tank boss that can't hurt you simply because you're standing right by it is just plain fucking horrible. The only really saving grace to Lucia's levels is that she only deals with 13 instead of Dante's 18. The development team may have set out with the goal of improving the game using fan feedback, but they failed miserably in every aspect. The graphics are poor, the character designs are poor, there is no character progression, the game mechanics are dumbed down, and the level designs are just horrible. It really leaves much to be desired for a sequel to such a great game like Devil May Cry. Hopefully though, we can lay this game to rest now and move on to an actually good Devil May Cry game that properly refined the mechanics. Devil May Cry 3.
Yeah, fuck this isn't going anywhere. Advil, fuck him up. Yeah. Wait, what are you guys planning? The fuck politicians. Oh my god, what have you guys done?
Oh shit, hey bro, how have you been?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm gonna go get Daddy's sword and claim his power. Bye!
Okay, well that's a good plan, but here's another idea. You could fucking not. Can I help you?
Wanna know the name? Devil May Cry.
Okay, so it's kind of hard for me to properly describe just how I feel about this game, but after a lot of thought, I think I figured out the perfect way to do so. Alright, so I haven't exactly made my genuine hatred for Devil May Cry 2 a secret in this video. Between the slow and boring combat, the lame story, and the fucking... Can you even call that dialogue? The game was legitimately one of the worst games I've ever played. I'm not exaggerating, by the way. I fucking hate that game. So fucking much. However, Devil May Cry 3 is the exact opposite of 2 in almost every single way. Whereas 2's combat was slow, repetitive, and boring, 3's combat was fast, complex, and exciting. Whereas 2's story is completely uninteresting, 3's is easily the most well-written and fascinating. And while 2 may be my least favorite game in the franchise, 3 is legitimately one of my favorite games ever. Again, that's not an exaggeration, it is legitimately one of my top 5 favorite games ever made. So why? What makes Devil May Cry 3 stand out so much from the rest of the franchise for me? Well, I guess we should start off in the same place where we've started the last 2 reviews off, with the story. This game, at least in my opinion, is easily the most compelling and well-written story in the entire franchise. Taking a nice little jump back in time, this game takes us to a point well before the events of the first game when Dante was a wild, energetic teenager. Within the first cutscene, we're immediately shown that this game takes a much different tone than the predecessors. Whereas Devil May Cry 1's Dante was shown to be kind of cocky but still fairly tame, and whereas Devil May Cry's 2 Dante was a silent, boring wooden doll, Devil May Cry 3's Dante completely flips the script. He's energetic, he's brash, and he loves showing off, and I mean he loves showing off. This isn't to say he doesn't have his serious moments, he certainly does, but now more than ever he's made into an incredibly fun character. You actually enjoy watching him pull off crazy, stupid stunts and seeing him interact with the other characters. Speaking of other characters, I wonder who else is in this game. Holy fuck, it's Virgil! Oh, I'm gonna fucking cry! Sorry about that, but yeah, this game lets us properly meet Dante's brother, Virgil. I'm just gonna say it right here, Virgil is one of my favorite video game characters of all time. He isn't particularly funny or entertaining or anything along those lines, but the way he carries himself and interacts with his brother has always grabbed me. Much like his brother, he can be very arrogant and cocky, but he's also very intelligent and extremely ambitious. While Dante is perfectly content to just hang around and kill any demon in his path, Virgil is absolutely obsessed with obtaining more power. Specifically, the power of their father, Sparta. This ultimately puts him at odds with Dante and ends up being the centerpiece for the plot. Virgil wants to open up a gate to the underworld with Arkham's help, and in order to do that, they need Dante's half of the amulet bestowed upon them by their mother. After Dante's, invited to the tower, the game kicks off and it's time for you, the player, to take control and see for yourself what a fucking badass Dante really is. Now, I don't really want to get too in-depth about what exactly happens in the story, mostly because if you haven't played this game before, I want you to be able to experience it firsthand. This game takes you through such a series of twists and turns, and the interactions between Dante and his brother are some of my absolute favorite cutscenes in any game. Lady also has what is easily the most interesting subplot of the entire franchise. Oh, and by the way, just throwing this out there, Lady is way cooler than Trish. Don't fucking at me. It's hard to describe what an incredible jump in quality the writing is when compared to the previous two games. Everything feels so well thought out, and the characters actually feel really well developed. Hell, if you pay attention, you can even spot a bunch of nice little details that make a lot more sense to you if you already know the story. But of course, the plot isn't why people play these games, no matter how good said plot is. So let's go ahead and drop this here and talk about where this game really shines. It's motherfucking combat. I don't think I'm really saying anything unique when I say that the combat system for Devil May Cry 1 was easily its strongest point and easily one of Devil May Cry 2's weakest. Devil May Cry 3, however, takes what worked for 1 and improves upon it tremendously. For starters, you're immediately given the option to choose one of 4 different styles that have a genuine impact on how you go about tackling enemies. The Trickster style gives you better dodging capabilities and puts a focus on avoiding enemy attacks. The Swordmaster style grants you extra melee attacks and puts a focus on offense and maximizing damage output. The Rail Guard is a much more defensive style that allows you to parry enemies. And the Gunslinger, which is my personal favorite, gives you extra abilities with your guns, granting you more options when surrounded or when enemies are a bit further away from you and you can't immediately touch them with your melee weapons. Each of these styles forces you to think about how to approach enemies and entices you to play around with each one. Right off the bat, it adds an extra layer of complexity that the previous games never had. There are also 2 other styles that you can unlock later on in the game by defeating certain bosses, although, to be honest, I never really used them. Yeah, but the TLDR is that Quicksilver allows you to temporarily stop time, and Doppelganger allows you to summon a copy of yourself to help you in combat, both with the trade-off of consuming your Devil Trigger gauge. Moving on from that, true to DMC form, there are a variety of weapons that you can find throughout the world or obtain by defeating bosses. From a pair of dual swords that have the power of fire and ice, to Dante's classic shotgun, to a big-ass rocket launcher, to a fucking guitar that shoots lightning. That's not a joke, that's in this game, you can do that. Fucking yeet. You certainly don't have a shortage of weapons to choose from, and of course each one plays completely differently from the others. Agni and Rutra, for example, are great weapons for crowd control when you're surrounded, whereas a weapon like Beowulf is better for dealing a shit ton of damage to a single enemy at once. But with all these new weapons and a stronger focus on making combat fast-paced, complex, and fun, DMC3 had to figure out a way to give the player all these options without breaking the pace of combat. If they had you change weapons in a menu like they did in the first game, the player would likely either feel the need to stick to only one weapon during combat, or essentially spend half the battle in the menu swapping out weapons, which would pretty much break the flow of combat entirely. So they brought back the ability to quickly change your weapons with one button mid-combat, one of the few good mechanics introduced in Devil May Cry 2. However, with so many weapons to choose from, it would just take way too long to switch to the weapon you actually want to get to mid-combat without it feeling like a chore, and when you're in the middle of a tense fight, the last thing the player needs is to be dicking around with a bunch of weapons trying to get to the one they're actually looking for. So, for what I personally assume to be for that very reason, they made it so you can only have 2 devil arms and 2 guns equipped during any given mission. While at first glance this may seem like it makes combat less complex, it actually kind of adds an extra layer of strategy to things. It forces the player to decide before the mission to think about what they want to bring with them. What weapons complement each other? What weapon do I want to have with me if I get surrounded? Should I bring a gun that's slow but does a massive amount of damage? Or should I bring one that's weaker but has much more flexibility? It all depends on your playstyle, and with the ability to replay missions at will, you have plenty of chances to experiment and discover what works best for you. But stepping aside from the weapons, I want to go ahead and talk about another core aspect of the game, its difficulty. One of the things that made the first game work so well was how hard it was, the way it forced you to think about how to approach enemies. And one of the things that made the second game so dreadfully boring is that they threw that difficulty out the window. And as it did with Devil May Cry 1's weapon complexity, this game takes that difficulty and cranks it up a notch. And by a notch, I mean this game throws you straight into the fucking wolves. While the first game kept things slow at the beginning and gradually introduced you to tougher and tougher enemies until they finally decide to throw a boss your way, DmC 3 decides to prepare you by just immediately throwing a bunch of enemies at you, and even throws what essentially amounts to a mini-boss at you near the beginning of the game. This guy's a fucking bastard. He blocks, he teleports, and he deals a shit ton of damage if you aren't quick enough to avoid him. I think it's safe to say that this dude does a great job of setting the tone for the rest of the game. This game isn't going to hold your hand. If you want to win, you can't just blindly swing around and hope for the best. You need to stay on your toes. Watch what your enemy is doing. Remember their attack patterns. Take note of physical cues. This ultimately leads to a feeling of genuine accomplishment when you come out on top and kill everything that's in your way. And all of this applies 110% for the bosses. Oh god, these bosses are so fucking good. I mentioned earlier that this game throws you right into the wolves. Well, for the first boss, they throw you to a literal wolf. A giant, three-headed ice wolf. Most people would call him a dog instead of a wolf, but that would kind of ruin my joke, so, you know. Fuck off. Anyways, yeah, if you're new to this game, or maybe a tad rusty, this first boss is probably gonna kill you. A lot. I mean a lot. But at no point does it feel like this game is being cruel with its difficulty. You start off with all the tools you need to take out any foe in your way. You can kill this boss. All you have to do is get better. When you die, take note of why you died. Improve your reaction time. Dodge better. Figure out when to take advantage of an opportunity to deal damage. That's what this game is doing. It's pushing you to improve, to get better. Also, speaking of bosses, one of my favorite aspects about this game is that they brought back the banter between Dante and the bosses. I praise that aspect about the first game because it helped make the bosses more interesting and made their reuse much more forgivable. It also felt like a lack of banter between Dante and the bosses in the second game was a huge factor that helped make those bosses so much more forgettable. There was nothing particularly memorable about any of them. They were just kind of big enemies that you stab at a bunch. But providing those back and forths in this game helps make the wide array of bosses feel all the more unique. The fight with Agni and Rudra is still to this day one of my favorite boss fights in any game, in large part because the game gives us a good feel of what their personalities are like beforehand. Now, I could honestly go on and fucking on about this game, but this video is already way longer than it should be, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut my review short. Just trust me, if you haven't played this game, fucking change that as soon as possible, please. I promise you won't regret it. But before we move on to Devil May Cry 4, there is one final thing we do need to talk about. After this game's critical success, Capcom eventually released a special edition in which they added the ability to play as Virgil. Fucking Virgil! Now, I'm not going to be going over his campaign myself, but as I mentioned, my friend Narrcost will be. So, take it away, my dude!
You're as cold as ice. You're willing to sacrifice our love. You'll never take advice. Someday you'll pay the price. I know. I've seen it before. It happens all the time. Closing the door, you leave the world behind. That was from the great philosopher Foreigner from their hit song As Cold as Ice. And it does actually a really great job of surmising what Virgil is compared to Dante. Now, with Dante's campaign, you are forced with a stylistic bravado to kind of push the envelope of action, but this changes around for Virgil's campaign. The only difference between the two is the fact that the beginning cinematic is a little bit different, with Virgil meeting Arkham and them kind of discussing, man, we should really bring the fucking demons into this world, bro. And he's like, yeah, that sounds great. And then that's it. You get a stereotypical like Seven Samurai showdown where you're like killing blood demon monkeys for some reason. But you know, it's all in Devil May Cry fashion. So what they kind of did here was interesting because they kind of give nods towards the original Devil May Cry. And as you get further into the campaign, Virgil's able to pretty much pick up every single weapon that Dante already had, except he refuses to use guns because he's the sophisticated one. You get it because he's wearing blue instead of red. He's not very passionate. Yeah, it's very nuanced. So after you watch an episode of Rick and Morty, come back here and we'll kind of discuss the other differences in this campaign. Virgil's campaign was essentially slapped on for the special edition. Every boss battle is the same as Dante's, and when you would normally fight Virgil, it's essentially a mirror match, except this time, the Virgil that you're fighting is wearing red. Get it because they're twins, and haha, it's kind of cheeky and an easy way to kind of get around the fact that they didn't know what they were doing, and they didn't need to really add another boss battle. But that takes away nothing from the rest of the charm of the game. The gameplay is the story in itself. Now, Dante's gameplay was more of a brutish hack and slash, try to get in there and get as many hits as possible. You're hitting enemies up to 20 to 30 times at a time before they're actually dead. Now, with Virgil, it's all blade-based. He only has his spirit swords, the Yamato, which is an overgrown katana that would give Sephiroth a bit of a hard-on, the Force Edge, and Beowulf, which is the gauntlet. Now, what's interesting with Virgil's movements is that they're much more precise, heavy-hitting attack. Now, the Yamato is the crowd control. You can hit 5 to 7 enemies up at one time with a single slash. And many of the moves from the boss battles are actually reintegrated into the standard gameplay. Now, believe it or not, this kind of works for a benefit and a disability to the player. The problem comes with Virgil's campaign in the early game. His moveset is very limited, and he's not as quick as Dante. So this usually means that your combos get interrupted before you can even pull them off. But with time, Virgil becomes a very versatile fighter. It's a slow burn, and if you're not looking for that kind of initial challenge, what ends up happening is that there's several times that the boss fights become very frustrating because they were meant for Dante's quick movement. Be able to move in, get a couple of hits, and get out. Virgil is left usually very open by the end of his combos, leaving him prone to getting attacked from all sides, and his recovery options really aren't that great. But ultimately, Virgil's campaign is something that's short, sweet, and just a nice little addition that was released for something on the PlayStation, over 13 years now. Is it really worth going through the campaign as Virgil? Really, the beginning cinematic is the only thing that really changes. But if you want to get a feel for a slower-paced Devil May Cry where you have to think about what you're doing rather than button mashing, Virgil's the kind of character you would like to play. But outside of that, it comes down to your preference. If you're a fanboy and you just want to experience everything that Devil May Cry has to offer, it's a nice little addition. But before you even get into the campaign, I recommend that you just play Virgil in the Bloody Palace, get his levels up, get his combos going, and you'll have a much better time because it's a slow burn to start off with, but by end game you essentially are a demigod amongst these pitiful demons. Virgil is just the extra stylish cherry on top, so enjoy him while you can.
Hi, I'm Nero, and I'm the new protagonist around these
parts.
Bad
Nero.
God, Daddy, no, why?
Raise
why?
our sales.
Stop it!
Bear the burden of our bad marketing.
It's intuitive.
Why don't you cry out for Kyrie again, you little bitch?
On January 31st, 2008, Devil May Cry 4 was released, and Capcom took a pretty major change with the series. Dante wasn't the main character. He takes a step back for the newcomer Nero to tell his story. This is a rather risky move for Capcom, but it pays off in a major way. This game gives look into a post-Sparta-influenced world where the city of Fortuna worships him as a god. City legend states that he severed the Hellgates and acted as a feudal lord for the city. A religious organization called the Order of the Sword protects the citizens and hunts demons. All seems well during a celebration of their savior, until Dante makes a bit of an explosive appearance and straight up murders the Pope.
NANI?! お前はもう死んでいる。
Yeah, things escalate pretty quickly after that. The city becomes overrun by demons, and you are tasked with taking down the guy who killed your leader. You step into the shoes of Nero, a young rash punk who has a demon arm called Devilbringer. He carries a double-barrel pistol called Blue Rose and a sword called Red Queen. Red Queen adds a really fun mechanic to melee combat called Exceed. The sword can be revved like an engine to fill the Exceed bar, giving up to 3 charges that are used in subsequent attacks. The Exceed charge coats your blade in a special kind of repellent, making the attack more powerful. It can be charged by revving it multiple times out of combat, or revving right as your sword connects with the enemy will give you instant charge, adding an extra layer of complexity to the combat. The sword revving actually provides my favorite Nero cutscene in the entire game, and helps to set the tone for its personality. It's when he stabs a puppet, revs it, and rides it around the courtyard. He also does not gain new weapons, or devil arms as they're called, and instead his new abilities focus on increasing his Devilbringer's usefulness. The Devilbringer is actually what brings the biggest change in combat style over Dante. It can project a version of his demon arm to slam demons around, or can be used to grapple and pull them towards you. This allows for a whole slew of new combo options, as well as gives him a very agile feel with being able to quickly maneuver between enemies. However, some of the new abilities you gain are never explained. For example, when you gain the Aegis Shield, it just says you obtain it. Even the description doesn't tell you what it does. Eventually, with experimentation, you learn you can grab an enemy and hold onto them like a shield. Nero's personality is like taking Dante and cranking it up. He maintains the same level of sarcasm and biting wit towards his enemies, while not giving a damn about mocking them to their faces. Unlike Dante, though, he does throw around a fair bit of vulgarity by telling people to screw themselves, and even giving Dante the middle finger there towards the end. He is very quick to anger and is very emotionally driven. This is a pretty stark contrast to Dante's more chill personality. That being said, Dante isn't left in the dust. He comes back full force for about the last 30% of the game. The changeover is pretty jarring though after getting to play as Nero for the first 70%. He comes armed with his trusty signature weapons, the Sword Rebellion, and his guns Ebony and Ivory. His multiple fighting styles also make a return, those being the Trickster, the Gunslinger, Swordmaster, and Royal Guard. Those can also be quick switched mid-combat using the D-pad. Each style brings its own abilities and movesets, allowing you to start in one style and finish the combo in a different style. However, this does not make up for the fact that Dante feels sluggish and outdated compared to playing as Nero. Not only that, but it offers a jarring experience trying to quickly figure out how to use a different character mid-campaign after using someone else for so long. Dante's personality is back in full swing as well. Every interaction with a boss is a unique cinematic treat, and every new weapon he obtains, even though there's only 3 of them, gets the attention they deserve. I just really wish they had put the same creativity into his levels. This entire portion is just backtracking through Nero's levels, but with slight twists. You refight all the same bosses and most of the same enemies. He does get a few of his own unique enemies like the demon puppies. The cutscenes do showcase the extreme difference in their power. Dante is a combat veteran and it shows. He actually kills the bosses instead of letting them run away. He can use the new items to great effect and destroy the Hellgates that Nero ignored. Even when the two fight each other, you can tell Dante is way stronger and is just toying around with Nero. The campaign overall is an absolute blast to play, but it does fall a bit to some of the same technical problems as previous titles. One of which is the camera system. While it can be shifted a bit by the player, it still deals with affixed camera locations, and those can be very jarring. Often you'll pass through a door only for the camera to shift in a way that causes you to walk back through the same door you came through. Another problem comes to the platforming. You can use your arm to grab floating orbs and use them to catapult yourself, but in certain areas you can get stuck by accidentally flinging back and forth between the same orbs instead of progressing. There is a bit of a situational repeat as well. One particular instance now makes me fucking hate board games.
I'm Mr. King Dice. I'm the gamest in the land. I never play nice. I'm the devil's right-hand man.
The art is more stylized and fits in with the Devil May Cry motif. You do get to fight through some varied environments, including a snowy mountain, a green forest, and a city. Overall, the story is pretty well done. Nero gets proper time for character development, and he is given motives he actually cares about. He may dislike taking orders, but he will save the girl he crushes on. There are plenty of twists and turns that keep you interested in hoping to find out what happens next. There is also the ability to play through the campaign as 3 other characters, the first being Virgil, Dante's brother and wielder of Yamoto. He provides a quick powerhouse with swords flying in every direction. You can also play as the Lady and Trish combo. Lady takes over Nero's missions, while Trish takes over Dante's mission. Lady has a fucking cannon that has a grappling hook on it. It's pretty satisfying to launch off missile barrages. Trish offers a lightning-quick melee experience with her scythe and demon lightning abilities. Each character has its own combat feel and depth, making it worth the replay. However, other than their introduction cutscenes, it removes most of the other cutscenes because they have to remove all the Nero-based ones. So they can feel more like an afterthought that was shoved in at times. This game crammed a lot into it. New characters, new world lore, new abilities, lots of character development, and lots of new combat possibilities. I feel like this game did an amazingly well job for the risks it took, and it makes me look forward to Devil May Cry 5 to see the return of Dante and Nero.
Devil May Cry 5 comes out, but you know what the real Devil May Cry is, bro? The DmC. Objectively the best Devil May Cry game. Alright, you see that fucking... That's a stick figure of Edge.
All the Edge.
I was trying to make him look angry, and he just like looks...
He's super Asian.
He looks racist.
Super Asian, baby. Mino Reiki Devil May Cry.
There's just cool red... Look at that fucking Edge, fam. Alright?
Too many edges on that coat. Too many cuts.
And there's that. This was supposed to be... We were supposed to have like an actual animation here, but you know... time constraints were a thing, so this is what you guys get between reviews instead. Look at me, and we'll see Ninja Theory's really edgy version of Devil May Cry. Yeah. This is dumb.
Now it's time for the black sheep in the Devil May Cry series. DmC Devil May Cry was released on January 15th of 2013 and had the unfortunate fate of being developed by Ninja Theory, a studio that had the credentials but not have the backing of the fans. To top it off, the series' original creator, Hideki Kamiya, was negative about the game's direction and stated that he was, quote, missing Dante, although in later tweets he expected people to try the game. This all happened, of course, prior to the game being even released, but the negative press left a cold welcome to what was arguably the best action game of 2013. DmC follows an alternative reality to the original series. This time Dante isn't the anime trope that we've come to expect, but an angsty young Nephilim, half demon, half angel, living in a city named Limbo. Now, Limbo City isn't your average run-of-the-mill metropolis, but is secretly controlled by all-powerful demons, manipulating humanity through the comforts of life. The story takes place after Dante is warned by a young woman named Kat, who tries to warn Dante about the demons seeking him and about the organization that she belongs to, that is led by his long-lost brother Virgil, and they must defeat the evil Mundus, who's now a corporate overlord. You catch all that? That's all you need. What I love about Devil May Cry, or DmC Devil May Cry, is the fact that this game is action incarnate. You like combos? You got plenty of those. You want wham bam zingers? You got one of those too. One of the biggest controversies about this game is the fact that Dante didn't have white hair. Let that sit for a minute. Because your one character didn't have white hair, and that was an honest-to-God reason why this didn't sell so well. People hated the idea of Dante being changed in any sort of way, that they refused to play a game based off a style choice. Another reason I love this game, and apparently everybody else hated, was that the combat system was revamped. So instead of having clunky controls where your jump button is also your dodge button, they had dedicated buttons for dodging, attacking, switching your weapons on the fly. But this is traded off by facing enemies that are only weak against certain attack types. For example, an ice enemy is only weak against ice, and a fire enemy is weak against fire. But apparently this was such a terrible thing to people that they had to revamp it in the 2015 re-release of Devil May Cry, because people were complaining that it was too difficult and it brought the combat to a standstill. But I just call that strategy, and when God of War does it, God forbid, that's the greatest mechanic that ever came out, but it's not because Dante doesn't have white hair. Where's my enemy at? God, I'm sorry about that. Shit. But yeah, as I was saying, the mechanics are a lot better in this game. I highly recommend it, and I don't understand why people haven't played it more often. Please, for the love of God, don't let them do this. Don't let them bully the marketplace into what the concept of a video game should be. Remember, video games are nice because they can change. They're supposed to adapt. They're supposed to evolve. Give it a shot. This is my favorite in the entire series, and that's me saying this after being a Devil May Cry fan for over 15 years now. Devil May Cry 3 is great. Devil May Cry 4 is probably the best mechanically from Capcom. But there's nothing quite like DmC Devil May Cry's gameplay. If you want the true Devil May Cry experience, this is the game that you're looking for. Look no further. Ninja Theory did a great job by honoring the Devil May Cry name and enhancing it in every single way.
Well, we fucking did it. It took an hour-long goddamn video, but we did it. We went through every game in the Devil May Cry franchise and gave it a proper review. Beautiful. If I had to rank them all, personally, I would say that Devil May Cry 3 was the best of the franchise, followed by DmC, followed by probably Devil May Cry the original, and then Devil May Cry 4, and then probably Devil May Cry 2, which... Before we wrap this up, I also wanted to quickly see how Narrcost and Meltdown will personally rank their shit, so there's that. Okay, so, Nar, the video.
Yes.
Video's fucking... We're good to go. So, before we wrap this thick boy up, rank the games. Devil May Cry 1, 2, 3, 4, and DmC. If you had to rank them, best to worst, how do you go?
Oh, God. Okay, so best to worst. Shit. We'll start off with worst. The worst is the one. Devil May Cry 2.
You roboted it out, what?
I said Devil May Cry 2. Only worst. Devil May Cry 2, shit. I'm gonna say, Devil May Cry 3, and then DmC, Devil May Cry, best May Cry game.
So at the bottom it was 2, then which one was above that one?
Devil May Cry.
Okay,
1.
Okay, so best to worst is DmC, then DmC 3, and then was 4 under that?
Oh shit, I forgot about 4.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's what was throwing me off. Like, where's 4? We're missing
4.
one here.
Okay, hold on. Let's do this one more time. Alright, well, I got that 4 exists. Jesus Christ, Nero. I'm gonna say...
I forgot 4 exists.
Shit. Okay, so yes. Okay, worst. Alright, and then we're gonna go with... We're gonna do Devil May Cry 4. Then we'll do Devil May Cry 3, and then Devil May Cry.
Okay, so the video that we've been working on that has taken retardedly long, and I've probably put too much effort into. It's done. It's ready to go.
Nice.
All we need left, well, pretty much done. I need, if you were to rank all the games in order of best to worst, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4 DmC reboot. How would you rank them, my guy?
Okay, so I would probably have to say, but Devil May Cry 3, Devil May Cry 1, 4, reboot, and then 2.
It's good to know we all unanimously agree 2 is the worst.
I think that almost the entire community agrees.
And there you have it. Everyone's rankings, everyone's reviews. We're fucking done. Fuck, this took too long. Fucking huge thank you to my brother SystemMltdwn and my good friend Narrcost for the reviews. Fuck, this was a dick to put together. This was a fucking nightmare, but it was worth it. Devil May Cry is a fucking... I'm a big fan of the franchise. This was a passion project for me. So a huge thank you to them for their reviews, and another huge thank you to Christina Wonders for her fucking fantastic animations. Fucking top quality. I've done the Italian Kiss like probably 3 times. So yeah, huge thank you to all of them. Links to all their channels are in the description, as well as the links to everybody else who helped out with the video with like voice acting work and all that good shit. Fuck you, video's over, go away. Are you okay? Are you good? Ow. Did that hurt? It stung. Oh, okay. As long as it didn't like break anything, you're not bleeding, are you? No. Don't fuck with Dante. God damn it.
Cut a bitch.
I will fucking end you, I swear to God. I swear me mom come at me.